thought I would put this in at the front for the people who are fairly new to marketing, which appears to be most people. And that is, what is it anyway? Marketing, I remember thinking marketing back in the day, as they say. A lot of people thought marketing was selling, and they confused the two terms. Selling is a part of marketing, but marketing is a very, very wide-ranging subject, as you'll see in a few minutes. But it's primarily a process, and it's a creative process that really works on it's everything you do, in effect, from the moment your product is finished or grown or harvested, whatever. Everything you do from that moment on, other than, I guess, collecting money from your customers, is marketing. So you communicate with your customers and your consumers, because they're different in most cases. Customers and consumers are different, and we need to be clear on those terms. And you deliver value to the customer if you've done your homework on consumer research. You have to know what the end user or your customer values and prefers before you can provide it, right? Makes sense? And then you have to maintain the relationship with the customer. Now, if you're in the commodity field, you maintain your relationship with the customer only probably through low price. And I don't know whether too many of us want to be in that end of the marketplace. So marketing provides that a good market manager can maintain a relationship with their brand of customers through a myriad of ways today. Marketing has been so complex. I see a couple of iPads in the room, for instance, here. You know, the digital revolution that we're going through is mind-boggling when it comes to the changes in marketing. There are literally, I'm not sure, hundreds of different ways that you can talk to your customers and your consumers today, but there are many, many dozens of different ways. And your job, if you choose to take it, accept it, is to find that way or those few ways that really pay off for you and that product that you're producing, manufacturing, or selling. Another way of looking at it is this. The marketing is a technique that's used to identify your customer. If you attempt to satisfy every food buyer there is, you're probably going to fail in your business today. You have to really focus your resources, particularly if your resources are limited. You have to focus them in the segment, the market segment, where you're getting the biggest bang for the buck. Once you grow and become a larger marketer, you can start to spread out and diversify your marketing targets. But it's always a good idea to start small, obviously. That's how all businesses start as small. So you identify your customer, satisfy your customer, and then you keep your customer. Again, there's the word satisfy again. In order to satisfy, you have to know what satisfactions are required. And to keep the customer, this speaks to branding, brand loyalty, and we'll get into that a little deeper here in a few minutes. But the perfect business is a business where you can sell the same thing over and over and over and over to the same customer without really spending any more of your resources on it. The repeat customer, that's the ideal. So you can see how this is all hanging together now. If you're only competing out, you're just pushing your products out into the marketplace and keeping your fingers crossed because of the low prices that are driving your particular part of the marketplace. You really don't know what's going on, and it's very difficult to manage any of it, because in British Columbia, from the research that was done just a year and a half or so ago, we're pretty sure that about 75% of the food buyers, consumers, buy on price. However, within that 75%, there is a wide range of where they buy on price, because you have all kinds of market segmentation now like this. I'll give you one example. Lots of people today will go to Walmart or Costco and buy the low price, higher volume items that are sort of storable, you know, toothpaste and soap and that sort of thing. And their logic is, when the roundtables were done, the logic is that if I save money in those places by buying that kind of stuff that I'm sure of, I can go to Whole Foods and buy the real good food that I value, the fresh food, organic food, those sorts of things. So there's a phenomena out there today that everybody needs to understand if you're going to be able to identify and satisfy and keep your customer. Okay, so those are a couple of ways of looking at the marketing process. Now, hopefully you'll be able to see lots of text on this particular slide, but the essence of the slide is this. And again, it goes back to you as a business owner deciding beforehand what it is you want to accomplish. Because as that little bit of wisdom points out, achieving organizational goals depends on knowing the needs of your target market, satisfying them more effectively than your competitors, because everybody has competitors today for whatever you're doing. And those competitors may not be British Columbia growers, ranchers, processors, manufacturers. They may be Chinese or Indian or Brazilian. So then it leads to this concept that by adopting marketing strategies, you're automatically, and most people are astounded at this, automatically they shift from focusing on their product to focusing on their customers. And changes get made in the product. And again, just not to put too fine a point on this concept, but that second paragraph there really means that if you're focusing on your product, you're in a sense being a very selfish business manager, because what you think the market wants and needs may not be what the best particular market segment that you should be selling into, what they need. You have to ask your customers. Your customers are, there's an old concept in food marketing that means that the only new money that comes into the supply chain or a value chain, the only new money that comes in through consumers like you and I when we go into a restaurant and have a steak, or whether we go into Save On Foods and buy our groceries and so on. That's the first new money that comes in to the system. And that money, of course, then is divvied up, for want of a better term. And guess who's the last link in the supply chain or the value chain to get paid? The grower or the rancher, right? And the grower and the rancher, the lowest on the totem pole, unfortunately, which in my sense should be the top of the totem pole, that particular link in most cases takes what they can get, what's left over. And that's a real shame. And, you know, in some of the other provinces, like Alberta and Saskatchewan, for instance, who have very, very just dramatically large sectors, the beef sector in Alberta and grains in Saskatchewan, those particular producers are in a different situation totally from small BC producers. British Columbia has the most diverse agricultural industry in North America. There's a couple that are close to us. North Carolina and Quebec are very, very close, but British Columbia has 240 different categories, agricultural subsectors, if you like. And North Carolina doesn't even have 200, and it's in second place. What that means is that the operators are mostly small, some medium-sized, and they don't have the resources really to compete. So if our small British Columbia operators are stuck in the commodity price trap, it's not a very happy life for them at all. So that concept there, by becoming primarily a marketer instead of a grower in your mind, and be able to pick up the experience, the skills and the experience to do market segmentation and market targeting, which we'll be talking about here shortly, you will hopefully quickly change your mindset to satisfying customers instead of making it as easy for you as possible to grow your product, your crop, or to raise your lambs or whatever it happens to be. Okay, that's a fundamental kind of truth today. Anybody recognize those 4 Ps? So back not long ago, this is the way marketing was taught, by the 4 Ps, and it was very, very product oriented. And one of the reasons it was product oriented was because marketers could get away with pushing stuff on us through mass advertising, and primarily lifestyle advertising. And that was back in the day when consumers, and not just commercial consumers, but voters, for instance, users of government services and so on, consumers of every type, you and I, we were not as well educated on what we could do about satisfying our own needs. There was a sense that we had to take what we could get. Another good example is back in Detroit, and the American automobile industry got caught flat-footed in a change from car buyers who would take, again, lifestyle decisions. If you sort of saw yourself as an affluent executive, they had a Cadillac or a Lincoln or whatever just for you, and they advertised that way, and people bought basically on those kinds of things. And now, of course, and you had to go to a dealership and you had to submit to some pretty slick salesmanship to buy your car. And now contrast that with today, where we buyers, we pick up our iPad and we can get all of the information we want on whatever we're looking for. And to get back to that automobile analogy again, what do people do today? Most people have done this. You decide before you even talk to a car dealership what it is you want, what color you want. You've got all of the reports on the products and the Edmunds reports on the cars and so on. So today, we are in a position to be very, very astute, educated, and tough consumers. So we'll show you in a minute a more modern sort of approach to thinking about and understanding the marketing mix. By the way, place was always one that confused some of my students. Place is distribution. Where is your product available to consumers? A convenience store, a farmer's market, Loblaws, that sort of thing. I'll just run through these fairly quickly because we're going to deal with a few of these today, the basics, but some of the others, for instance, distribution, pricing, packaging, sales, advertising, and public relations are subjects that are going to be dealt with in subsequent workshops. But for the purposes of today, we want to really focus you on consumer research and how important that is. Advertising, that second block down at 9 o'clock there on the screen, is advertising, of course, has morphed into dozens and dozens and dozens of different avenues that people can get their message to you. And some of them are pretty frustrating too, if you don't have a pop-up blocker and so on. So one of the major changes, I guess, that we consumers really dealt with here over the past few years was telephone soliciting. Telephone soliciting is kind of a thing of the past now as far as commercial sellers are concerned. There's a great example of consumers, and it was a consumer push that really stopped that and produced the no-call lists and so on. And in the States, I didn't give you much of a biography on me, but when I worked in the U.S. 1999 through 2005 in small business development, it was amazing. Small entrepreneurs and small businesses felt that telephone soliciting was a fantastic way to spread the word and to prospect and gain new customers. So it's totally gone now. So how things will shift going into the future, we're not really sure. Whether something like that will come along in the internet world, it could very easily. Advertising, of course, is swiftly changing on mass advertising, broadcasting. The number of people that watch broadcast programs is falling fast. More people are going to cable, and of course the future is on our devices, our portable devices, where we'll probably be getting most of our television consumption in the years to come on iPads and whatever replaces those someday. Public relations is a very interesting marketing technique for small operators because it involves really everything that you do, getting your message out or getting your product tried, if you like, that isn't advertising. These would be things like events, trade shows, those sorts of things. Earned media is, I guess, a part of, I don't know whether maybe you could tell us, is it a part of advertising or public relations? PR, yeah. It's PR, yeah. And earned media is where you may be interviewed by Country Life in BC, and it's fabulous, fabulous exposure. First of all, it comes with a lot more credibility than an ad does, I think, as you know yourself. So public relations is a great place where small operators with limited resources should really focus their attention. And we are going to provide you with some great ideas on how to do that. We had a great example not long ago from the Okanagan, in fact. The research center up in Summerland developed a number of new strains of apples. And one of them was called the Golden Gala. And it has a absolutely knockout taste to it. And when people get a bite or two of it, they can't get enough of it. And they're just starting now they're starting to make sure they've got enough growers to provide the marketplace, because they don't right now. But what they decided to do was they went into places like Whole Foods and some other specialty food stores and set up a small demo desk and offered people slices of the apple. And the moment the taste test was done, the people went running down the aisle to get the apples, and they sold out of those apples within sort of like the first hour every time they tried it. And of course, their next challenge is how do they segue from what's pretty labor-intensive way of getting your product across to a more, more massive approach to it. But they're producing, that particular technique is producing sort of really, really solid repeat customers. So that's an example of that, public relations, where you want to actually focus. Up at the top, the sales component that we touched on very, very briefly a few minutes ago. The sales component comes in where if you're marketing or selling through a farmer's market, and there are a number of people on the call on the workshop today that are doing that, you're dealing directly with the consumer, with the end user. And you're in effect taking a sales function there. You're actually speaking to the end user and answering their questions and maybe helping them decide whether they should have this, that, or both, and so on. Sales, there's a great definition of sales that you might want to remember. Sales is the method of helping someone else make a decision in their own best interest. That's what sales is. And you notice how that's worded. It's customer focused, isn't it? It's consumer focused. It's not pushing a lot of what you're producing into other people's hands, whether they need it or want it or not. It's dealing with your consumer, your customers' preferences up front. Packaging, again, early in the call I talked about how some things are more important than others. If your product is packaged and sitting on a shelf or in a bin or whatever, the packaging is becoming more and more important all the time. Notwithstanding the regulatory aspects of packaging and labeling content and so on, the research that's being done by the national research chains see packaging as being a more important attraction for buyers all the time, particularly men buyers, believe it or not. Men are doing more and more of the grocery shopping all the time, but they don't take very long to go down an aisle. If something doesn't catch their attention quickly, they just don't really even see it. So that's quite, I thought that was quite revealing. So there's another area where packaging, if you have a packaged product, you shouldn't really short circuit that aspect of it at all. I'm sure you understand that. And pricing, of course, is strategic pricing. There are pricing strategies that should be used when you're introducing a product, which will be different than when your product has been out in the market for a while. There are different strategies if you're under heavy competition. There are, again, a myriad number of these ways of pricing your product based on the marketplace, not on what you think you should get for it or what your costs are. I don't know, in my 25 years of coaching entrepreneurs, how 9 out of 10 of them, of course, wanted to say to me, well, it costs me $8.95 to make this thing, so I've got to sell it for $27 or whatever. And that cost up pricing is pretty dangerous today. Again, you can do it when you're the size of Windset Farms or something like that, but not at the very beginning. Okay? So pricing strategy is a very, very complex but very important aspect of the marketing function. Not necessarily. It all depends on, again, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? If you're trying to get into the marketplace quickly and you're using that as a taste test, if you like, because you do give away a slice of the Golden Gala apple in a sense, don't you? You don't charge for it. So you want people to experience it, and people probably wouldn't pay for a slice of that apple, not many of them anyway. So it depends, again, on what your objectives are. And there's price neutral strategies where probably a lot of you would be in right now that are already marketing, where your product is priced based on a number of factors. One of them, the competition, because if you're not well diversified, or you're not diversified, but you're not well differentiated from some other product on the shelf or in the bin or on the floor, you can't really charge much more for it, or you're not going to sell any of it, because people will usually only pay a premium if there's value that's perceived there. Okay? Or brand loyalty too. That's premium pricing and brand loyalty walk hand in hand. And last but not least is distribution. Again, distribution is kind of there's in a lot of ways there isn't much choice in it once you get past the sort of direct farm gate, farmers market stage of distribution. Your customers, not your end user consumers, but your customers, this might be a category manager or the manager of a small retail food store or a restaurant owner will dictate in a lot of ways the distribution patterns that you start to use. So a lot of content on that slide, but that shows you the full range of what marketing is all about. Okay? Pretty well everything other than making your product or growing your product. Any questions on any of that before we refresh our slides? There's a pat answer if you sort of, I guess, narrow your approach. If you're selling or distributing through farmers markets, the loss really is sales that you won't make because you've sold everything in the first 2 hours. However, if you're up the scale, and we'll talk about this in a minute, this distribution scale. If you're upscale a little bit in that you've got wider distribution and the 3 restaurants you're working with, you're providing grass-fed beef to, have it on their menu and you can't provide it, there's pretty severe damage done to your business right there, and the restaurant's business also. So there's not a pat answer to your question. Although people run into that at pretty well every level of production, whether you're a brand new producer, a one-person band, or whether you have a huge company. And of course, you're particularly vulnerable if you only have one product. So those are problems that you need to arm yourself with information and solutions, so that when you are approaching that situation, you recognize that it may happen and you know what you're going to do about it. Make sense? Well, now that we've taken a look at all of the various functions of marketing, let's take a few minutes to do a little bit of private review. In your workbooks, if you turn to page 3, you will see the exercise there to uncover the 2 functions of marketing that were not shown on the slide on the screen a few minutes ago. There are 2 of them. So take a few minutes now and just circle the 2 that don't match, that don't apply. The upshot of the whole thing is this, that if I had a dream for all of the people that are participating in this workshop, it would be for you to see yourself as a marketer above everything else that you do. Because the only place where numbers start to add up on your top line, your revenue line, comes from consumers, first of all, and then through your customers. And the difference between a customer and a consumer is another sore point that many people get confused about, and we're going to deal with that. So these terms may seem very simple and primary, but they're very important that you have a concept in your mind about each one and why they're different and how to deal with each of them and so on.